I'm Bailey Mihalovich and I'm presenting on behalf of my Stat 220 group. The topic we chose to investigate was fatal police shootings throughout America. Going forward with our investigation, we decided to seek answers to the questions we formulated in regards to the variables given to us within our dataset. The question and points include, but are not limited to, was the victim shot fleeing the scene or not? Which race is fatally shot more often in reference to state? Which ethnicity is shot more often or may appear to be targeted? We would also like to take a look at if a body camera was present during the incident of the fatal police shooting. We would also like to look at the threat level of said victim and if there were any signs of mental illness within that victim. Using these questions and points of interest, we hope that people get the answers they are seeking in regards to fatal police shootings. To find these solutions, we used RStudio to manipulate the dataset to extract solutions from said dataset. We also made visuals to convey our solutions to the public. We also ended up using CART models to find possible predictors as to why victims were fatally shot by police. As fatal police shootings throughout America have become a common phenomenon in today's media outlets, we thought that our research would be beneficial to American citizens in regards to this issue. There is many speculation revolving around fatal police shootings in America, and this is why we ended up choosing this dataset. Let's move on to our method. We first scoured Google for the best dataset. We ended up finding our dataset on datazar.com. The reason we chose the dataset on datazar.com is because it provided variables that would determine solutions to the frequently asked questions in regards to fatal police shootings. Although our data appeared to be clean from first glance, when trying to manipulate the data for our graphs, we found that it would be easier to develop a scale in which the armed column correlated with. We ended up doing this by revaluing all the various ways a victim could be armed by 0 to 5 scale. Starting with 0, 0 means unarmed, 1 being contact is needed to deem weapon as lethal, for example a knife, 2 being weapons that are lethal from a distance, for example a gun, 3 being various weapon combinations that include a weapon that is lethal from a distance, such as a knife and a gun, 4 being weapons of mass destruction, and lastly 5 being an undetermined weapon. It was rather difficult to create this scale as some criminals or victims chose rather arbitrary weapons of choice. And what I mean by arbitrary weapons of choice is that some victims chose to carry some of the following: a meat cleaver, a fireplace poker, a contractor's level, a bayonet, a lawnmower blade, a stapler, a flashlight, a chainsaw, and lastly a simple yet effective weapon of choice, a brick. We also ended up renaming other variables to make the dataset easier to manipulate. After the data cleaning was accomplished, we decided to start manipulating the data into graphs to show trends and visualizations that would then pose solutions to the questions we had asked. We then ended up developing a CART model to show possible predictors as to why a victim was fatally shot by police. Now moving on to our results. I'm going to start with the first question we formulated. Which ethnicity is shot more often or may appear to be targeted? As you can see by this graph, whites end up being shot by police more often than any other race. This is also probably because whites make up the majority in America, but when comparing whites to blacks, as you all know, a minority group, blacks are fatally shot by police slightly over half as many times as whites. I feel like this is necessary to note. This can signify that police discriminate towards blacks more than any other race, taking into consideration that they are a minority group, but yet fatal police shootings towards black people is rather high. This may appear that blacks are targeted by police, but it isn't a solid answer to that question. On to the next question. The question being asked here is, was the victim fleeing the scene or not? Before we get into this graph, it's important to note that the pink dots mean that a body camera was not present, and blue dots mean that a body camera was present. As you can see, most suspects who are fatally shot by police were not fleeing. Also, in most documented police shootings, the cop involved in the case was not wearing a body camera. From the previous graph, you're now probably wondering, well, since the suspects didn't flee, well, are they armed? This graph is going to provide you with that answer that you're looking for. As you can see, most of the dots on this graph are either green or blue, which signifies that they were indeed carrying a weapon that could be lethal to a police officer, or could be seen as a threat to a police officer, which is probably the reason why they were fatally shot by police. This could be a legitimate reason in the court of law why they were shot. The shade purple signifies that they were unarmed when they were fatally shot by police. But as you can see by looking at the graph, most of the suspects that were unarmed ended up trying to flee in some way, whether that be on car or on foot, which is probably also why they were shot by police. Now on to the next question. Which race is fatally shot more often according to state in which the accident occurred? From observing this graph, you can see that Illinois actually has the highest rate of fatal police shootings towards black individuals. It's also important to note that California actually had the highest rate of Hispanics being shot by police, while Alaska had the most Native Americans being shot by police. And lastly, it's safe to say that whites and Asians are equally distributed throughout the graph, so there isn't one state that dominates the fatal police shootings for that race. In the next graph, we are going to compare threat level to flee and see if there was a body camera present. Once again, pink dots meaning that a body camera was not present, and blue dots meaning that a body camera was present. For the victims that did not flee but decided to attack, most of the dots appear that a body camera was not present. It's hard to say what really happened without cold hard evidence, such as a body camera, to explicitly lay out what really did happen within that incident. Lastly, we're going to take a look at mental illness and see if that is an important factor when comparing armed to race within a victim or suspect. Pink dots meaning that signs of mental illness were not present, and blue dots meaning that signs of mental illness were present. As you can see, the white race tends to have the most signs of mental illness, with 1 being contact is needed to deem weapon as lethal on our armed scale. As you can tell by this graph, most of the people correlating with the 1 on the armed scale showed signs of mental illness. It's also important to note that victims who used weapons of mass destruction against police also did indeed show signs of mental illness. Now let's move into the predictions we made using CART trees. First, I'm going to start off by saying the reason some variables aren't showing up within the CART tree is because there wasn't enough data to be represented within the CART tree. The first CART tree I'm going to show you is one that predicts threat level based upon the armed scale we created. This CART tree includes the armed scale numbers 1, 2, and 5. As you can see, suspects and/or victims who rated a 1 on our armed scale did pose a positive threat level, while suspects and/or victims who possessed weapons rated either a 2 or a 5 on the armed scale presented a undetermined threat level. What this means to me is that suspects and/or victims carrying a 1 weapon, such as a knife, posed more of a threat than victims or suspects who were carrying 2 or 5 rated weapons on our armed scale. 2 or 5 rated weapons are, for example, guns and/or undetermined weapons. People who are rated 2 and 5 on the armed scale posed an undetermined threat. In conclusion, people who carry, for example, a knife, 1 on the armed scale, end up being more of a threat as opposed to other suspects or victims who chose different weapons. First things first, black and whites are the only races that are shown on this CART tree, like I said before, because there wasn't enough significant amounts of data regarding other races. Within our data set, most of the victims and/or suspects that were fatally shot by police were under the age of 41 years old. So it's safe to say that it's mainly young adults who are being shot by police. Getting to the specifics, almost 48% of whites are fatally shot by police under the age of 25 years old. As opposed to blacks, nearly 22% of blacks are shot under the age of 25. So the victims and/or suspects who are black appear to be fatally shot by police when they are between the ages of 25 and 41 years old. Lastly, let's take a look at mental illness and see if it plays a factor. Mental illness plays a factor when it comes to young adults, as they're the ones who show the most signs of mental illness. Alright guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. It took me a long time to edit, so I hope you enjoyed my editing. We put a lot of hard work into this, and I'm really proud of how it turns out. This was a very interesting data set to explore and research, and I had a good time doing it. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you for watching our video, and have a good day.